The May employment report unexpectedly adding 2.5 million jobs was just the latest data point in a slew of stronger than expected economic numbers, suggesting the U.S. economy may be faring better than at least some of the more dire or worst case scenarios suggested early on as a result of policies forcing businesses to close and workers to remain in the confines of their homes. Of course, while the nominal increase of 2.5 million jobs is a welcome step in the right direction, the May gain only accounts for roughly 10% of the total job destruction recorded since the shutdown began, leaving the unemployment rate then firmly fixed in double-digit territory. In other words, it's hard to be overly excited about a relatively modest monthly increase in jobs juxtaposed with 13% unemployment and a lingering loss of roughly 20 million jobs. Of course, taken at face value relative to the 7.5 million loss expected, the nominal gain, even if only partially recapturing the total number of jobs lost over the past several weeks, will continue to fuel market expectations, more positive sentiment that the impact of the economic shutdown is less daunting than previously feared, and thus the hurdles the U.S. economy will potentially face on the other side of the pandemic may be fewer or less intense as we struggle to return to some sort of normal. Looking at the details of the May report, job gains were widespread across industries from retail to manufacturing to hospitality and leisure, reflecting both the widespread impact of the economic shutdown and now the broad-based reopening. After all, as suspected, many of the recent job losses are already proving to be temporary. That's the glass half full. As states reopen and businesses are allowed to once again welcome customers back and employees are able to return to work, and we've already seen this positive progress with a noticeable decline in continuing jobless claims. So some jobs will return, some immediately, as the pandemic is contained. However, from a glass half empty perspective, many of the jobs lost over the course of the shutdown will not return. Many of those lost are expectedly lost for good. Keep in mind, this has been an incredibly trying time for businesses, particularly small businesses, some of which have been simply unable to tread water during these last several weeks and have already announced permanent closure. And for those businesses that have been able to bridge the gap over the past 3 months, while they may be anxious to get going again, they now face new restrictions or rules limiting where, how, to what extent they can operate. Restaurants, for example, in many states have been allowed to reopen this month, but at a severely reduced capacity, in many cases just 25%, which will profoundly limit activity levels and by extension then the number of employees needed and consequently the total number of workers rehired. Furthermore, on the demand side, amid lingering health concerns without a viable vaccine or even a clear-cut way to separate the healthy from the sick, not to mention crippled individual or household finances, many consumers, shoppers, diners may remain hesitant to re-enter into the marketplace as they once did, at least in the near term, even if they are now permitted to do so by local authorities. Bottom line, the latest May employment report was a welcomed reprieve, suggesting at least some improvement in the U.S. economy, the U.S. labor market. As the individual states and broader economy slowly reopens, many of those individuals temporarily laid off or furloughed are already being recalled to their station. Many others, however, may face a more permanent position of joblessness amid lingering health and financial limitations. In other words, it remains to be seen if the rise in May is a reflection of an ongoing improving trend in job creation or simply a return of the bare minimum of the labor force needed to reopen at reduced capacity. In the end, the shape and trajectory of the recovery of the U.S. labor market, will very much depend on how quickly corporate America and the consumer returns to business as usual.